Good morning and good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for joining this webinar on the key findings and takeaways from the seed security assessment and workshop that were conducted in Central African Republic. My name is Jennifer Mayer, and I'm the Climate Resilient Agriculture and Natural Resource Management Advisor on the ProWash and Scale Award, which is a learning award funded by USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance that supports capacity strengthening and research for BHA implementing partners around the world. We focus on the sectors of agriculture, NRM, water resource management, livelihoods, and WASH. Joining me this morning from the ProWash and Scale team is my colleague Bella. If you have any technical issues during the session, please reach out to either of us and we can help you. Next slide. Before we get started, we wanted to let you know that we will be providing French interpretation during this meeting. Please click on the globe button marked interpretation at the bottom of your screen and select your preferred language, whether English or French. You can also choose which language to view the slides in. We have them in both French and English. So please go to the very top of your screen and click on View Options for a drop-down list of the screens that you can view. So Kyle is sharing the English slides and Bella is sharing the French slides. So you can select your preferred language to view the slides. And also please note that this event will be recorded. So today we'll start with an overview of the key findings and recommendations from the Central African Republic Seed System Security Assessment Report. And then we'll hear a peer-to-peer interview where our presenters will share their reflections on the key takeaways and next steps discussed at the SSSA workshop that took place in Bangui in March. Last, we'll open it up for questions from the audience and a guided discussion about the way forward. Next slide. So let me start by introducing today's presenters. Roger Chongo is an independent seed systems consultant who helped lead the seed system security assessment that we'll be discussing today. And Adamu Abdurimo is the Director of Program Quality and Performance for Mercy Corps in the Central African Republic. Welcome to you both. Roger, I'll now hand it over to you to take us through the key findings and recommendations from the report.
Bonjour à tous et merci à Jennifer de m'accorder.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Jennifer, for giving me the floor. I would like to present some of the key findings and recommendations from the Seed System Security Assessment in the Central African Republic. Next slide, please. I would like now to present the key findings. The evaluation took place from the 13th to the 24th of June, 2023 in 21 villages, and we had a team of 9 people doing the interviews, 3 people doing data entry. Slide. Here, you can see the stakeholders who are involved in the workshop for sharing out results and discussing recommendations and how to translate these results into actions. And Mercy Corps organized this workshop in March, and we had 23 people participating in the workshop, representing 16 different organizations from BHA, ACTA, the FAO, CICR, ONASEM, the University of Bangui, the Ministry of Agriculture, Concern, and Mercy Corps. Slide, please. The overall objective of the evaluation was to identify limiting factors to making seeds more accessible. And some of the specific objectives were describing seed systems for species that are grown in the Central African Republic, analyzing the different seed acquisition strategies present, and to explore appropriate responses to improve seed security. Slide, please. Here you have the methodology that we used to do this evaluation. We used several data collection tools that were adapted to the different actor groups, such as key informers, informants, households, village councils, local markets, and private individuals. We cross-referenced this data, which allowed us to draw out some of the primary obstacles and for more details about this methodology, including the specifics of how we applied it, you can visit our website. Next. This study targeted a geographic area around Bangui and Bakala, up to Wango, Grimari, and out to Wabe, as well as all of the Bangassou area. Slide, please. Here are some of the main observations and recommendations that we identified in terms of seed security. First and foremost, here are some of the crops that are the most important in the region and which were cultivated in the 2023 growing season. You have peanuts, corn, cassava, rice, and sesame. And the projections for 2024 are essentially the same, as you can see on the graph here. Sesame is slightly up, and also up are peanuts and manioc and cassava and rice are slightly down, as you can see again in the graphic. Next slide, please. Here, you have another observation we were able to make. Here you have the different sources, informal sources where people get their seeds. Most households get their seeds from their own stores. Following that, they buy them on the local market or receive them as gifts, or which is through their social networks from friends or neighbors. And the most important source for corn, rice, and cassava were personal stocks. And then for some of the other crops, it was the local market. And for peanuts and rice, as well as gourds, they were almost as high as for sesame and cassava. Next slide, please. What we observed is that most farmers planted less than in the previous season. And this dip in seed use was most noted for crops where seeds have to be bought. Farmers planted less because they did not have enough money to buy seeds. Seed prices were high and they have a low purchasing power. Next slide, please. We also observed that this was because of farmers' low purchasing power. That is why some crops were planted less. This pointed out that there is a lack of money for buying seeds, a lot of financial difficulties. Seed prices were also quite high. These were some of the reasons that producers shared with us. Another issue was the availability of seeds on the market. The lack of seeds from other neighbors for certain crops went hand in hand with quality issues or productivity issues for some farmers. There was also a lack of labor and health problems were given as another reason for reduced seed use among some farmers. Next slide, please. In terms of supply, seed supply in 2024, we believe that there will not be significant problems in terms of availability because farmers are able to use seeds left over from last year's harvest. Wholesalers have also reported to us that they have seen a 10 to 30% increase in their inventories, so shortages should not be a problem. Next slide, please. For mixed communities, where communities are both men and women, we notice some chronic seed insecurity. The local seed provision sector has been relatively stable over the last 5 years with very little innovation. Access to new varieties and improved varieties has remained very limited. Next slide, please. Women, for their part, confirmed that they play a key role in food security for their families because they are growing squash, peanuts, corn, cassava, and rice. Women at the head of households, disabled people, and their dependents are among the most vulnerable groups, and they need support in order to access quality seeds. The problems of insecurity, a lack of financial means, and instability in the region have all had negative impacts on families and on the practice of agriculture in the region where we were working, of course. Slide, please. Here, you have a representation of the seed system in the Central African Republic, which shows formal seed systems and informal seed systems and how the two coexist. In terms of the formal system, which we are building up, or we are seeing it being built up, you have ICRA, which covers agronomic research, and the state, which supports seed producers to help spread their seeds more widely. Both have been impacted by recurring and repeated conflicts. And while they should be working on developing improved varieties and helping small-scale producers adopt improved techniques, those two things have been a problem. The creation of the National Seed Office, or ONASEM, aims to support seed production, but this organization is not yet sufficiently present across the country, and especially in this area we were studying. We also observed that agricultural input distributors are entirely absent from our study area. Slide, please. Slide, please. Here, we have the dominant informal system. As I just said, the informal system is in parallel, but also dominates, especially for small-scale producers. If they are not able to find enough seeds, they will buy seeds directly on the market if they don't have enough in their own stocks. Wholesalers supply Ouaka Prefecture and the surrounding areas on a local level, and also sometimes areas in neighboring countries such as Chad, Cameroon, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Passing on to recommendations. Next slide, please. We have two kinds of recommendations to make. First, some general recommendations, namely to strengthen the capacity of agri-multipliers as well as existing farmers' organizations to produce and multiply seeds of new varieties. Also, to establish a comprehensive two-way communication strategy to provide farmers with technical information and basic agricultural knowledge. Also, to make money and microfinancing opportunities available to small-scale farmers. We also recommended that a study be commissioned, a specialized study on female-headed households with regard to seed security challenges, and we would like to involve seed security specialists and gender advisors in this initiative. Next slide, please. And then in terms of stakeholder recommendations, we recommended the following. First, to collaborate with ICRA, ACTA, and ONASEM, which are all state organizations, to strengthen and improve seed production and certification by focusing on priority crops, which I have cited above. Two, to use technical supervisory agents and multiplying farmers to support the production of quality seeds. Three, to facilitate small farmers' access to markets for the sale of their seeds. Four, to inform farmers about good grain storage practices and seed storage practices to avoid losses. And five, to develop an action plan in collaboration with UN agencies and private sector players, as well as humanitarian players, to fill gaps in seed security and provide technical and commercial support to seed producers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Roger. That was a really great overview of the key findings and recommendations. And next, we want to hear from yourself and from Mbomou, as you had attended the in-person workshop in Bangui back in March. And we'd be very interested to hear how that discussion went in the workshop, which focused on having the participants in the in-person workshop discuss these key recommendations and how best to put them into action, as well as talking through the coordination and collaboration going forward in the seed system and seed system interventions in CAR. So I think let's turn it over to you, Roger, and Mbomou now to have a sort of peer-to-peer interview where you can discuss those key takeaways from the workshop. Mbomou and Roger?
Yeah. Merci, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer, for handing me the floor, giving me the floor, and thank you, Roger, for your presentation with the findings and recommendations. We had a workshop to share the findings or to develop the findings and recommendations with many different partners in Bangui. It was in March 2024, just a few months ago, and this workshop brought together representatives of 16 different organizations who are all involved in seed issues. Over the course of a day, we held discussions and reviewed what concrete steps could be taken to develop a more operationalized action plan. To do so, workshop participants were asked to discuss, to hold discussions in two groups. Each group focused on different recommendations. The first group, Group 1, talked about delivery issues and approaches, as well as matters of availability, access, and information that is available on inputs outside of seeds. Group 2, on the other hand, discussed availability and the availability specifically of quality seeds. They also talked about communication and about information sharing and the issue of farmers' purchasing power. I will now ask Roger to share with us how exactly the conversation went in these groups. Roger, over to you.
Merci, cher Adamo.
Thank you, Adamu, my friend.
Nous avons demandé à chaque groupe
We asked both groups
sur quelques questions clés
to focus on a few key questions.
qui ont commencé par
First
quelles
off,
sont les approches qui ont été
what
utilisées
approaches
par le passé,
were used in the past, have been used in the
quelles
past,
sont celles qui ont eu des succès,
and which of
quels
those
sont les
succeeded?
défis et les
What
solutions possibles.
were the challenges that came up, and how were those challenges overcome?
Vous venez de vous dire,
As
d'ailleurs,
Adamu just
nous
said,
avions deux groupes.
we had two groups,
Dans la discussion du groupe 1,
and in the group 1 discussions,
on a parlé des points de livraison et
we spoke about
des différentes approches.
delivery
Il y a
issues and
été
different
question
approaches,
de différentes modalités
and we
de
talked
livraison
about a few
sequentielle.
different seed delivery
Alors, dans
modalities.
ce cadre, ils ont expliqué un peu
Group
les
1
différentes
explained
options
or went
qui
through some of the different
là,
options that are
nous allons
available,
voir aux intrants,
namely
des
input
boutiques autogérées,
fairs,
des magasins
shops,
de vente d'intrants
input sales points, seed sales points,
des semences qui étaient distribuées directement.
and direct seed sales.
Les foires aux semences, quant
The
à elles, pour eux,
seed fair
favorisent le choix
would
des
promote
agriculteurs.
a better choice amongst farmers, allow them to make more choices,
La vente
and these fairs
et mettent les
promote
producteurs en contact direct
sales
avec les
and
fournisseurs.
put producers in direct contact with suppliers.
À des problèmes
However,
de
there
durabilité
are sustainability issues.
à l'extérieur.
They are often organized by outside groups
Sécurité
and
ne sont pas toujours garanties.
depend on a certain level of security, which cannot always be guaranteed.
Autogérées, quant à elles,
Self-managed markets, another
permettent de réaliser
option,
des économies d'échelle,
allow for economies of scale
la circulation des produits,
by helping
améliorent
more
le pouvoir
products
de
circulate
négociation
while improving negotiating powers,
et
buyers'
garantissent
negotiating power.
une meilleure qualité de
They
semences.
also guarantee better seed
Mais ils ont
quality.
tendance à exclure les
However,
petits agriculteurs
they tend to exclude small-scale farmers
sur les grands
and to
opérateurs
focus only
comme
on larger operators like NGOs.
un risque de non-respect de
They also run the
réglementation
risk
en matière de semences et
of
défendent
not
fortement
following seed
l'installation
regulations
stockage de semences appropriées
and
ne
of
sont pas encore
disrupting
présentes dans
proper
ce milieu.
seed storage, which is already a problem in the area.
Vraiment, la distribution directe, quant à elle,
Direct
elle
distribution,
fournit bien sûr des semences de qualité
of course,
relativement fiables
provides
aux
quality
endroits
and
les plus
relatively reliable seeds, even to the most rural areas and to the most vulnerable
mais
households.
pas
However,
long terme.
it is not a
C'est vraiment ça, vraiment
long-term viable option.
les groupes ont ramassé
Both
dans
discussion
ce
groups,
temps qui leur était imparti.
this is what both discussion groups came up with
Je
in
laisse donc
regards to this question.
Adamou
That's
faire un
back
commentaire
over
là-dessus.
to you, Amadou, to comment on what I've just shared.
Allô?
Hello, Amadou, over to you.
Adamo, have we lost you? Adamo, if you're trying to speak, you're on mute.
Merci, merci Roger.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Roger.
Les points soulevés par le groupe concernant la qualité des semences,
When the groups talked about seed quality, especially in terms of the different approaches, it was a very interesting discussion. Group 2, for example, talked about some issues that need to be resolved if we want to ensure better seed quality. For example, I can give you a quick example. They talked about the need to apply current seed laws that are on the books. We need ONASEM needs to raise awareness about the laws in force. We also need to pursue a better collaboration with ICRA. And we also need to be recruiting seed inspectors for ONASEM so that they can do their job correctly, and also decentralized ONASEM services to seed production areas from Ouaka and Bombari and Montpellier, Sangawa, and other areas, and also around Bangassou. They also talked about how to strengthen groups that already exist in the area, like Reprosem and GAM, and all kinds of other public-private partnerships with the goal of providing seeds to various structures and also financial support. The group discussed how to strengthen ICRA and the whole agricultural sector to develop new varieties that are better adapted to climate change. The group also talked about the need to improve farmers' purchasing power. For example, in terms of their access to financing options and revenue liquidity so that they can have enough money to buy seeds, and maybe restructuring or building up federations or associations across the area to facilitate that, and putting all of these producers in touch. When it comes to entrepreneurial approaches, the group talked about finding financing through microfinancing organizations. So those are some of the ideas the groups brought up in terms of concrete actions that would be important to adopt. Thank you very much. Yes, exactly. I completely agree with what Adamu just said. I do have one thing that we weren't talking just about seeds, of course. Group 1 also talked about importance to access to other non-seed inputs, especially tools, agricultural equipment, and the group observed that approaches such as working with hardware stores, local artisans, NGO distribution networks, and using animal traction or mechanical traction all have seen success in the past. Of course, these approaches each have their own problems with management and the need for different technical knowledge and capacity appropriate to each approach. And secondly, I think that another theme that we discussed, especially as we came to a conclusion on coordination and what path we should follow to implement all of these recommendations and to turn them into actions. I'll let Adamu go ahead talking about our conclusions. Yes, Roger, thank you. The second topic that we spoke about was how can we that stakeholders are involved in discussions about all of this and what that would mean for coordinating the seed sector in Central African Republic over the coming years. So how do you that this part of the session went? Yes, clearly support problems were raised. Two, several challenges were brought up, as you just mentioned, the challenges you mentioned. Group 2 also formulated solutions to improve communication and information sharing to help improve coordination and collaboration throughout the seed system. They listed several things. For example, reviving the actor platform, and this platform helped provide necessary equipment and information through a website or community radio. That's a possible option for improvement, to share information about the availability of high quality seeds initially, or at the beginning and at the end of each agricultural season. Also, we should organize seed awareness sessions in the community in partnership with humanitarian actors. We should communicate information about seeds during cluster meetings. We should map seed producers. So those are the main list of actions proposed. Yes, thank you very much, Roger. Those are the most important points that the group brought up, and coordination came up again and again as an important issue. When we spoke about coordination in the plenary session after the group discussions, several participants spoke about the need for a formal structure system that would involve state actors, but also NGOs. This platform exists, but it hasn't been able to live up to its potential due to different actors who are involved disputing the leadership of the platform. And we were waiting for a ministerial decree on the issue, but it has not yet been signed and published. After discussion and debate in the plenary session, we determined that the most preferable would be a grassroots initiative based at the regional or prefectural level and then moving up to the national level. However, the lack of some key players, such as ICRA, ONASEM, and ACTA, within decision-making bodies, did not make it possible to go farther in reflecting on this question. The lesson that we drew out from this discussion is that with Mercy Corps and the FAO, we work on the quality, or as well as members of clusters who are present. All of the participants in these discussions were very committed, very motivated, asked these groups to continue their advocacy work and to take the report, which is available in French and in English, that this information be shared with abstracts and summaries so that all local actors could understand. The conclusions of the study should also be presented to the various clusters online in the coming days in webinars in order to their inclusion in future actions. So this is a great opportunity that we have today with this webinar, and we'll keep sharing with other cluster members today and in the future. So that's all I wanted to add. Back to you, Jennifer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Roger and Adamu, for giving us that really useful overview of discussions that took place, particularly, working through and talking through with all those stakeholders in the same room about how the findings from this report and the recommendations might then impact the way seed systems work moves forward in this context. So I think that's really important that those conversations happened. And I know that they also raise more questions about next steps and collaboration, and what might change as a result of the assessment. So we've received many questions, excellent questions in the chat. And we do have time now until the end of the webinar for your questions and responses from Roger and Adamu. I think we're seeing a lot of questions in the chat about, did the workshop influence any change of strategies for any of the attending organizations? Sean asked this question, but others have also sort of touched on it. Abro also is kind of getting at that same question. And I know, Roger and Adamu, you touched on some of this in your summary, but maybe you could go a little deeper now and talk about any conversations, any indication that you heard at the workshop about the ways in which organizations who participated now plan to change the strategy or modalities.
Oui, tout à fait.
Yes,
Déjà,
yes, entirely. Oh, I think if I'll go first, if I may. Yes, having this webinar is already an incredible result. I think the fact that everyone is now more aware of the importance of seeds and that everyone is getting together to discuss that. Really is translating our recommendations into action already, and we welcome everyone to keep joining us in that, in turning them into action and in changing the seed system in the Central African Republic, which is being rebuilt, as I tried to explain. It's in a reconstruction phase. So the first initiative that came out of the cluster was a request that we share with all the members of the cluster this information. And there's also an initiative to relaunch the seed reflection group, the seed think tank. That is one result that can help change attitudes and the way that seed aid, seed assistance. So for me, those are some concrete steps we've already seen towards change.
Oui, merci Roger pour,
Yes.
pour cela. Il faut
Thank you,
dire
Roger,
que effectivement,
for what you've just said. I agree. During the workshop and afterwards, all of the participants were very enthusiastic. We all understood the importance of this assessment and of its main conclusion, of the main conclusions that came out of it, rather. So other than the request to translate all documents into English and French, there are many other recommendations that came out. Participants all understood that these were concrete steps, these were realities that we needed to, that were being faced on the ground. And that once we can create an operational action plan, that it will improve the sector in the Central Republic. So there was a lot of change discussed, especially bilateral changes between certain participants on many of the different questions we addressed. So that's all I wanted to add to what Roger said. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think then maybe it would be good to ask some of these more specific questions about the kinds of changes that may be generated by the discussions that we're having like today, but also the workshop. So for example, Sean asked, was there in the discussion for group 2, supply side issues that were identified, like early generation seeds, quality assurance, a decentralized production of seed. Was there any focus or discussion around promotion or marketing of seeds, or any other kinds of activities that implementing partners can undertake to build demand by farmers? Because that can be a difficult step. Roger?
Bon, effectivement,
Oui, or yes.
en ce qui concerne les trois axes qui ont été
The three main
pointés,
areas of focus, or three parts of the question, how to improve supply?
parmi les recommandations
Amongst our recommendations,
données, on s'est orienté vers une collaboration
we focused primarily on strengthening collaboration with ICRA.
entre les structures
So collaboration between
qui émettent en fait les
the
besoins en commun
structures that identify seed
et la
needs and putting them in touch with ICRA and ACTA. The goal there
parce qu'il y avait
is to re-energize these groups.
un nombre de
Recently,
de
or there have in the past been
semences qu'on a
seed producer groups
fait à l'époque dans ce qu'on appelait les réprocèmes.
that were called RECOSEM,
On avait constaté que ces groupements ne fonctionnaient plus et
but these groups weren't working anymore. And many of the research centers that had existed were heavily damaged by ongoing crises. For example, there was an ICRA research station in Dombari, which is really at the heart of our study area, and that research center was completely destroyed. So during our study, we met with a team that had come to the area to reopen this research station and restore its seed production capabilities, pre-basic and basic production capacity. So this is an opportunity to breathe new life into collaborations between ICRA and ACTA to support seed multipliers. We also observed that there was not good information circulation about seed availability. There was not good information available. That is why we recommended recreating an information sharing system that would share information about seed availability, seed quantity availability. That came out of the first group's analysis. When they talked about the possibility of creating an information system that would help all seed system players be better informed about seed availability and seed quality, etc. Also, the seed system, or rather the Central African seed system, created a new structure called ONASEM. This structure, this office, is new, and little by little, it has been building up its capacity in terms of human resources and equipment. So they have a central laboratory in Bangui and seed inspectors as well, who are located in Bangui. But their mobility is quite limited. It's not easy for them to reach the areas where our project is active. So we discussed this issue as well, the need to help these these inspectors become more mobile so that they can reach all areas and offer their support by assessing seed quality, the quality of seeds which are circulating in the market. So that's what I can share with you that came out of the discussion. But it really, it depends on the stage that you're at with developing the seed system in Central African Republic. As I said, it's really still at a low level. It's just getting started. Distribution, for example, there are nearly no seed distributors in the region. And that's whether we're talking about our study area specifically or across the entire country. There are nearly no seed distributors.
Yeah.
And the people who are distributing seeds, for the most part, are only there occasionally. They might come through to meet periodic needs from humanitarian organizations, for example. So that's mostly how seeds are distributed, but there are not professionals, people who are working solely in seed distribution. They're not there yet.
Yeah.
That's all for me.
But
Thank you.
you raise really good points. And that's such important sort of context for us all to understand, especially the nascent nature of the system there. There have been a lot of questions in the chat about striking that balance between the formal and informal seed sectors and what each can provide and where each of them are in their sort of state of operational, functionality. And I think that your comments just now helped kind of give the answer, the context to some of those questions. One question that maybe we haven't really touched on yet, Louise was asking, that she was saying that the seed security work took place within an area that's affected by conflict. So I think it would be interesting to hear from you. Have any of the different seed system recommendations been specifically tailored to the conflict context? Can you speak to that, either of you, Adamu or?
Bon, Adamo, je ne sais pas si je ne vais pas monopoliser la
Adamu,
parole.
I don't want to hog the floor, so maybe I can go after you. Oh, that's great. That's fine. Thank you. And thank you, Jennifer, for the question. Yes. When it comes to the recommendations and the lessons of the report and our security assessment, it must be noted that the whole assessment took a lot of organization, and that really means planning. It took a lot of planning and a thorough understanding of what resources were available. And so there were a lot of logistical issues, financial issues, to do a good, solid assessment. We also need a lot of expertise, especially to understand some parameters like seasonality. So in order to have the best quality data, we needed expertise, and we needed to talk with people on the ground, farmers on the ground, to have proper estimates. So that was a lot of technical organization. We had to recruit people, train people, so that they had all the information and tools they needed to understand the data collection techniques and to ensure that these data were as reliable and high quality as possible so that we could have high quality outcomes to better develop realistic recommendations. So that's what I can add about organization and planning of the assessment. That was very important. It takes a lot of planning before organizing any project, any field project to do with seeds. And I hand it over to Roger if he has something to add. Or there are people like Louise who might also have something to add to what I've said. Yes, I think it's a very good question that Louise has asked. The recommendations that we proposed at the end of the study, are they or how are they adapted to the context of the Central African Republic, which has been shaken by conflicts? Well, that had to be the case. We had to adapt the recommendations to the context. We observed that there are these two coexisting, these two parallel systems, the formal system and the informal system. And the informal system is the dominant one in our case. The recommendations that we made are, of course, adapted to this context because you have all the strengths of the informal system, which make up for the weaknesses in the formal system and vice versa. So in our recommendations, we recommended consolidating the seed system as a whole. For example, one of our observations was that there were not problems with seed availability since producers had seed reserves. So this year, there were not problems with availability. Farmers had their own individual stocks that they could use for seed. Also, suppliers, and I'm still talking about informal sector suppliers, had taken precautions and had done what they could to increase their existing stocks for this year. So we are not in a seed insecurity situation for the moment. So bit by bit, we're building up that security. However, there hasn't been any innovation. We've been lacking in innovation for several years. We're not producing new varieties. And now the situation is getting more stable in some areas. For example, in our study area, there has been more and more stability. So people are able to produce more and to produce more seeds, more varieties, improve varieties that can then be introduced little by little, along with new techniques, production techniques. So little by little, we hope that the whole seed system will become more stable as we make these small steps. Also, the seed system landscape in the Central African Republic benefits from the specific laws on seeds. And this seed law led to the creation of ONASEM, which is in charge of inspecting and certifying seeds. And again, little by little, ONASEM is starting to do its work where they can, where and how they can. Thank you.
Donc, c'est là où ça demande les
And
efforts.
so that's where more effort is needed. More concerted effort is needed from all kinds of actors, especially humanitarian actors. And I hope that everyone can use these recommendations. We can all use these recommendations to work better together and to consolidate the system where we can, where it's possible, and to make the most of the gains we've already made.
That's an excellent point to sort of land on, Roger, and it reflects, I think, a lot of the comments that and questions we're seeing in the chat, which have several common themes around the balance between informal and formal, and the need to kind of work on both almost simultaneously to kind of grow the overall strength of the system itself. I think we only have time for maybe one quick question, which is just to reiterate or reinforce, I've seen a lot of comments in the chat about, which is great, Lorena was asking, could we have this same presentation happen for the cluster? And I do agree with the points that Roger and Adamu have both made about these are ongoing conversations and they take us further and further along the process of collaboration and coordination for the seed sector, not just, what interventions, but also the role of government and getting them more involved in sort of coordinating the sector along with the cluster, et cetera. So I think that's really positive. That there's so much interest in kind of continuing to present this information and have space to discuss it. Maybe just quickly, we've got 1 or 2 more minutes. Bella, could we drop the link to the survey? Thanks. Just as we're wrapping up, it would be great if people could take a minute or 2 to give us your thoughts on how the session went today and suggestions for how to improve or how to take the conversation forward. And I also wanted to thank so much Roger and Adamu for joining us today to share with us their insights and reflections, not just from the assessment report and those findings, but also from the beginning of a very rich discussion around how to strengthen the seed system in CAR. I know that a lot of these themes are very common to seed systems in many other places. So I hope that this was useful and informative for everyone, regardless of where you are joining from today. And just to flag that the French version of the report should be coming soon, and we'll be able to post that as well on the FSN website. With that, I think we can close out. Roger, Adamu, any final remarks? But thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thank you, Roger and Adamu, as well. Any final thoughts?
Bon,
Oui, merci beaucoup.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for taking the initiative and thank you for this opportunity. And thanks for this webinar and allowing us to to present the results of our workshop in March. As you said in your conclusion, the French version of the report will be available soon, by the end of May, and we will share it with everyone who's interested. Thanks very much to everyone.
Thank you so much.